to EntrepreNINES. I'm John Wist.
And I'm Bonni Mace. We are two Enneagram 9s who took the big leap into the world of entrepreneurship at a similar time. And this podcast is a space where we're inviting you to laugh and learn with us as we work to build businesses with soul. This is episode 54.
54. This is our debrief.
Yes.
That's what we're calling it, right?
Debrief. Interview debrief. Because we just had an awesome conversation with Sarah Bosma of SJB Photography. And that was episode 53, the one right before this. So go back and listen to that if you haven't yet, because this conversation will make much more sense to you.
Like only makes sense. Maybe if you listen.
Yes. Like maybe we'll have some great nuggets for you. But also in context, it's just going to be a lot better.
Also, we're recording right after, so we're keeping the same setup, and I'm stealing the seat that Sarah was in if you're watching. Also, it's kind of fun. We're just doing it different in the sense that we're each going to have our own camera today.
Yeah, John's trying something new.
And we're just going to see how that
goes.
goes.
For the sake of social media.
Yeah, I'm a little sad to say that that is what's driving the change, but it is. It is. So
you know what? Social media is a big mean bully, and we all know it. So we might as well just say it's bullied us to this setup, and now we're intensely focused on in our own special way by these cameras.
But I'm also curious to see, number one, how it looks, what people think, if they give us any feedback at all. But
please give us feedback. You guys often don't give us feedback.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I think it's because our target audience is Enneagram 9s.
Right.
So I believe you guys are out there listening and engaging. And
you
also
do have something to say?
Not talking.
But you have things to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't believe that your voice doesn't matter, because it does matter.
It does. To us.
To us. Very much.
We would love to hear your voices.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, please do. So Sarah's a type 3.
Yes.
Which is our growth line, by the way. So I feel like that's great. I've actually really been looking forward to the type 3 interview the whole time because of it. It's our growth line. And I've always wondered, like, is it weird to be like, this is like our big sister like type, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, no, that's not fully true.
You didn't say that when she was in the room, so.
I didn't, but now, Sarah, if you're listening, you know. And it was a big sister type because she was female on this. But it does kind of feel like that of like, okay, what can I hear from this that would be a stretch for me that I can kind of like move toward too. But obviously there's like shadow sides to all of us. But anyway.
Yeah.
That's my secret.
It's interesting that you bring that up first, because we have some things I feel like we talked about, but it's interesting you bring that up first, because I do feel like there were things that she was, so like, for example, when she was talking about like her, well, it aligns with her core motivations, right? Where like her, growth point for entering community, right, is out of like not wanting to compete, like to move away some from her competition side, her natural and default. As I'm listening to her, I'm like, oh man, like I would love to be in more community. Like the problem is I don't speak up and say that I want to be in community, right? Like that, like for me, it has
they don't want me here.
Right. It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with me not wanting to be there, and it has nothing to do with me feeling like they're competition. It has everything to do with me like sinking into my like not growth point of like, oh, I don't have anything good to add to this community. Right.
Yeah. I feel that.
So I thought that was interesting, like to hear like how we want to move that way, right? Like she clearly wants to move that way. But the motivation or the thing she had to get over
are different.
Is that competition piece.
Yeah.
And for us, it's my voice matters piece.
Yeah. Because when it comes to competition, save a few like goofy things. Yeah. I'm going to be like, it's okay. You can win. Yeah. Like every time.
Overcooked.
Overcooked, I will beat. By the way, I dominated at a mini golf game this weekend.
I saw your story
and I was very competitive about that, because the first hole I hit it, I got it in 2, and then the second hole I got it in 2, and then the third hole I got it in 2, and my dad and Mark were both like whiffing bad.
Yeah.
Like,
and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I can win.
Yes, I was like way out ahead, and I was like, oh, now it's on, man. Like I'm about to take on this mini golf, and I got a couple holes in one. Like nice. There was no scorecard, which I'm very salty about.
There's right here.
Right here
was the scorecard.
And seared in the brains of my dad and my husband.
That's so funny.
Are realizing that they got the floor. I wiped the floor with them.
That's awesome. So
that's where my competitiveness comes out. That's about it. That's where it starts and ends.
Yeah. But talk a little bit about what you heard in like the competition community piece, because you did bring that up as one of your takeaways.
No, I love it because it just shows a testament of like her work toward health in her own business. And and when we talked about it, she wasn't even like aware that that was maybe such a big deal for her and for her type. Yeah. But as soon as I said it, as soon as I said like, this is a really big deal for you, I want you to know, you could see this like sense of realization sort of wash over her. Like, oh, that's why it was so hard. Like there's a reason that's so hard. I thought I was just, there's a reason. Right. And it's great to hear that I've overcome and done this like difficult thing for me. Right. And so I like it in two ways of like, like when we all put ourselves towards growth and wholeness and health, like we're going to take steps that way, and it looks different for all of us. Yeah. And like, had she had a little more Enneagram teaching like earlier on too, that would have been a realization she would have had earlier on and could have celebrated. And like she, hopefully now, what I hope for Sarah is that every time she leads into community over competition now, she can kind of like give herself a pat on the back for doing a hard thing in that way. So I think that was I just love hearing stuff like that.
Yeah.
When people do
which
that.
I think too is like, kind of building on what we talked about in our deep dive about how to love a 3 well, is to then also speak life into those places where it's like, you are doing the admirable thing. Yeah. Like good job, and like keep going. So that, that's kind of fun too.
And there's different ways to go about it. I mean, she could go about it where she's, you could be the top Annapolis photographer and you could tear down every other photographer in the area. Yeah. Like there are easier ways to do that. And I think the way that she's modeling is like, just great and lovely. And I love seeing that.
That's cool. Yeah. I think, and we mentioned this a couple times in the interview, but like she came like so well prepared.
So prepared.
Like no offense to any other guest that we've ever had, but like probably the most prepared guest that we've ever had.
She had highlighted notes,
like wanted to have her notes. And I love that. Like, number one, like I think that this is maybe a takeaway for us on one level. Like we really enjoy doing this. We do this for fun. But it means something to people. Yeah. And like, I think there is a lot in not just Enneagram, but just like having conversations about business growth and doing it at a pace that isn't going to kill you. Yeah. That is really valuable. And like for her to take that time, I like really appreciate that. Yeah. It means a lot to me that like she spent that much time. Number one, I think it's like learning about yourself, right? And her learning about herself a little bit better, but also taking the time like and making it so that it communicated to me like this matters on some level, which is I agree part of what we need to be able to do.
That was very affirming for us.
Right. Yeah. So like I appreciate it like that she is learning about herself, but I also appreciate like that what we're doing is being affirmed, I think is a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And maybe, well, to be fair, also maybe some of our other people have had notes, but we wouldn't have been able to see it because they have been like not digital. They were sneaky.
Yeah.
So sorry if you were an interviewed guest and you're like, I had notes, you just didn't know.
Right.
Anyway, but she was very prepared, which I appreciated. And and her value on that was high, which was type 3. She's 100%. Like, I don't want to sound dumb. I'm like, well, there's no way you could do that. Right. Yeah. But I will make sure that you feel prepared. That's okay.
Yeah. So that was great. And I think that, again, hopefully for her, like that it was a life-giving thing to do today to not only like hear more and like get to share obviously like sorry plant.
You just whack that plant real good.
Not only just like share some of her story, but like to hear some affirmation about where she is and how far she's come. Like, I think that was something we talked about right before we started is like, she is quite a bit further along.
Yeah. 10 years in. I didn't realize she had been doing it for so long.
And like, that's probably another kind of unique thing about the interviews that we've had so far is like, most of the people, they might have been doing what they're doing now for a long time, but running a business doing it, they're maybe closer to where we are.
Yeah.
Than,
I think so far,
than she is, where like, I feel like it's kind of, it was fun, I think, to hear her say some things. It's like, we're learning that. And we've talked about that on this podcast. Like, those are things that we actually like, you know, are learning and like, oh, maybe we're doing it right.
Yeah. Thank the Lord, we're doing it right.
Because she is like, I would say, you know, for just between the two of us, like she is what I would call a successful local business owner.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like she is well known around here. She definitely like has her niche and she has her style, like she talked about a lot. But she is like a desired person.
Yeah.
To you know, a desired photographer in our area. And so I think like for us to hear some things that she had to say, and it's like, oh, we felt those. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah. It's been cool to see her business grow. So the first time I hired her was like when Isaac was born.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was peak COVID and the person we had been using had just moved away. And like, because I also took college photography and like understand light and working with light, I like look at a photographer's portfolio looking for how do they work with natural light?
Yeah.
What's it look like inside? What's it look like outside? Like, what are they doing with shadows? Is there something weird, you know, like, and she had none of that. Yeah. And then it was COVID and she was really willing to like, she was masked the whole time. She was willing to come into our house. Like all of those things worked really well. And then the pictures we got out of it were like fantastic. Yeah. And I was so happy. And she, at that time, did not seem like super busy, obviously probably because COVID.
Sure.
But then the last, like, I'd say 2 years, just like watching her social media, she's exploded really over time. And like all of her minis are full. She's doing multiple mini days and like multiple sessions and more weddings and more stuff for the Navy. Yeah. And so it's been fun to like, as a client of hers, to just like cheer on her business because I know like she is very talented and she is like real and like is fun to work with and doesn't make you feel, you can make someone feel very awkward as a photographer.
Yes.
Like,
very awkward.
It's actually harder to not make them feel awkward.
Right.
Than it is to and she is very good at
She's very good. That. Yeah, she and you recommended her to us when we had Amelia.
Yeah.
And which would have been only like 6 months later, basically.
Yeah.
And she did this, like she came to our house and we had the first session there, and then we did minis with her a couple of years ago. And I think we mentioned on the podcast, like we've been meaning to do more because it's time for us to update like all our stuff. Yeah. But yeah, she's just she's great. I mean, she's great with people and she's great with the kids and she has 4 kids, so you know she knows how to be good with kids.
She knows the deal.
But it was fun. So yeah, I think it was fun to hear just some of her story and interesting to hear like her background with business and her honestly like it was something I walked away with with is like her having a background with business, yet having similar struggles to those of us who don't have business backgrounds.
Yeah,
it's just like,
I felt good about that.
It's just common. Like this is just a struggle. It's just hard. It's just hard. Yeah. like don't give yourself like an rose-colored view of it in the sense of like that, you know, just because you have that, that you're gonna have a leg up. Like I think she does. You know, there's more than one reason for that. Yeah. But you know, just to hear like, oh, like she hands off her finances too. Okay, great.
I'll love to hear that.
Awesome.
Yeah. For sure.
So, you know, I think that's maybe a good segue to talk too about, you know, just the fact that, you know, she mentioned like there were things that she didn't identify with, like things that she, you know, like specifically with the wing, you know, when you were talking about the way I
described it.
Yeah. And like just kind of getting a fuller picture of what a 3 could be, what a 3-wing 2 could be, that it didn't have to fit kind of like a narrow definition. And I think that's, again, like we've talked, I feel like kind of offhand or just like secondarily.
Yeah.
Because we try not to make Enneagram like super
the
dominant.
only thing we talk about, right?
But I think it's an interesting opportunity just for maybe for you to talk a little bit about like the Enneagram is not like prescriptive,
right?
I would say,
yes,
in the sense that it's like, here's what you are and this is the box you live in.
Yes, congratulations.
Right. And like that I thought was a really good opportunity for you to share a little bit, but like honestly, like we have more time here too now.
Yeah.
To share a little bit more about like why that is the case, or like why she can feel that way, but still be a 3-wing too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think what you're saying too is kind of like, this is what I've learned about the progression of learning Enneagram.
Yeah.
Is that at first we tend to learn it and then we feel like we found our box, and there's 2 choices that you then have. You get like nice and comfortable in that box and you're like, this is my box forever. And you kind of like keep it very surface level, but then you give yourself an excuse kind of to not grow beyond that.
Sure.
And that's, I would say, a misuse of the Enneagram, in my opinion. The other option is to say, oh, this is the box I get stuck in sometimes. And to just recognize I've already been in this box.
Yeah.
And Enneagram is giving me some clues of how to like step over the edges essentially and walk out of it and become more fully like the pieces of myself who I am. Like recognizing that the box is kind of like parts of our personality that we've built up to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And that we're more than that. And so learning to access more of that, like we talked about with her, reaching for community, that's stepping outside of the box. Competition is safe, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Community is risky. And for us, like stepping out of the everybody else gets to live their life and make their best choices. I will fade quietly into the background and cheer for you. Yeah. And stepping out of our box is saying, I also can make these choices and have a voice and stand out.
Yeah.
And so I will say the other thing that is difficult about Enneagram boxing in is when you learn it with a group of people.
Yeah.
Then they can kind of like try to close the lid on you really tight.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing you have to watch out for too, is like, you don't want to close the lid on somebody else's box either. And be like, well, you're a 9 or whatever. Like that's
right.
tricky. But some of what she was alluding to too, of just like this idea of what's basic about Enneagram is that we have our shared core motivations. Like when it comes down to it, as an Enneagram type, you can't really look at a core motivation and say, I never have that. That's immediately a red flag for me when I'm typing somebody.
Right.
If they're like, oh yeah, I for sure feel like and I was talking about this, I think this actually didn't get recorded because we had a faux pas with a thing.
Little flub.
But like one of my most difficult typing sessions was actually like a type 3 and his subtype was the counter type.
Yeah.
So there's these 3 subtypes that we all have. And one of them is a counter type, which means they don't tend to show up like the stereotypical like behaviors of that number. And he really thought he was a 9 to start out with. And then he very clearly, I don't relate to the weakness, the core weakness. And so that was immediately like this red flag because if you don't, like you have to have some relation, even if you understand what that means to you, to the core motivations. And then from that, everything starts building around it to make you kind of like show up uniquely in the world. So like how you access your decision-making triad, how you, there are people on the roof today, how you access your decision-making triad, how often and heavy you access one wing versus the other, what your subtype is, what your levels of health are, where you are in stress. Like there's one that fluctuates throughout the day even. So understanding like all of the nuance of that then helps you understand like, oh, just because I'm a 3 doesn't mean like I'm going to show up the same as another 3. Or like, just because I'm a 9 doesn't mean I'm going to show up just like John. And so just because John and I are both 9s and have a podcast together doesn't mean that like all of our struggles are the same, which hopefully at this point in the podcast, you have heard that from us. So,
and it's interesting because I do think like the more, I mean, it comes with like learning people too, right? Like, like being in relationship, I think you start to understand how you show up differently, even as similarly motivated people. Yeah. And so, you know, I think we see that all the time because we're with each other a lot, like we're hanging out a lot. And so like we see how we show up differently. And like, but that doesn't take away, I think it doesn't take away for me the ability for me to say to you something very specific because I know what our motivations are and they're very similar. And so like, I think that's part of the reason why, like when we're with our spouses and we're all together for a dinner, like we will have sometimes a very similar view of something, whereas like our spouses are like, what? Like,
you just don't get it.
Like, why? Like, where does that come from? That makes no sense. And, even though like maybe we arrived there differently or we found a different way there, like the motivation is very similar. So I think that's it. And it helps for me to also understand, having that conversation with her. That was what was cool about like what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast of like, oh, we all want to be in community.
Yeah.
Like, but either the reasons why or the obstacles we have to overcome to get there are very different. And so I have a lot more compassion for her now, or empathy for her, in the sense that like, you're overcoming a pretty strong like hurdle in your competition level, like to be where you are. And what I'm trying to do is like end up in the same place as you, but for me, it's not competition. And like being able to say that out loud and recognize that and say, for me, it's, probably at the core of it, like my ability to even ask for help.
Right. Yes.
Like
that's a big part.
To say like, I need help. Who can I seek out, instead of just like turning inward and trying to find it.
I don't want to bother anybody.
In my own strength. Right. Because I don't want to say, So, I think that's kind of and something that I think it missed being recorded because we had that little flub, was just like the idea that you've taught me, which is like that core motivation for us, it's that 9 core motivation, but, especially from the background we come from a faith background, like we're designed to reflect all of them in some way.
Yeah.
Like all of these types were designed to reflect that in some way. Some much, much more strongly than others, but that's how we're all designed.
Yeah.
Is to reflect all of these in some way.
Yeah.
It's just discovering the healthy ways, the not healthy ways, the ways that are more prevalent at certain times or that shrink away at certain times, those kinds of things, that I think makes Enneagram just far more dynamic than we can fit into a deep dive.
Yes. Yeah. And recognizing like kind of off of that too, that everybody arrives to those places like in a different way.
Yeah.
And like everybody's journey is going to show up a little differently. And like, I think the reason we like the box so much is because our brains like categories. And so we
Black
like
and white definition. Yeah.
Yeah. We like being able to like try to predict a human being. Yeah. Based on like what we think we know about their behaviors from a personality system. Yeah. And like the truth is we're just much more, once you can get past those initial boxes and allow the person to be the complex human that they are, like stepping out of that box, then it gets more exciting.
Yeah. That's cool. That's great. That's a good way to end. I like that.
Yeah.
I like there's a little bow on that. Bonni, I feel like this is the perfect opportunity.
Yikes. I feel a bit on the spot. Yes.
For people to take advantage of your coaching.
It's true. I'm hireable.
You are. Because I feel like in the interview and now, like we're touching on the fact that like this just like we can't get there here. No. Like we just can't. Like we would be here for a very long time. If we try to do this with every number that we talk about, that we interview, like it's just too much.
It's too much.
And also it's like, it's too personalized. Like it's too highly like specific. That I think like something that's interesting in hearing what Sarah had to say is like that one statement didn't fit her. Yeah. Right. And so.
But then I rephrased it. Right. To be like, being admirable for you is being early.
Right.
Caring for people's time.
So like how much impact in some ways like one phrase can have to like kind of shift the perspective and allow there to be more willingness and openness to say, oh, got it. So that is still like a good way to describe me, but I had to go deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and understand like, this is my brand. This is one thing that's like a phrase I'm using. Yeah. I can plug my reflection questions, which I've given myself a deadline of a new year release. So 2025. Okay. I will have reflection questions for every type. And so that'll be like a nice, easy way in, because I'll start to sort of like play at like how you individualize your Enneagram concepts, which is really where coaching like is super helpful. Is like, you can go to a workshop, you can do a group class or whatever, but like until you can talk out, this doesn't resonate for me. Right. And then I can say, okay, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or like, have you thought about it this way? Yeah. Your brand of this might look like this. Yeah. This. And then people go, oh, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, and also, what about your branding change?
Oh, gosh, John, we're going there.
Yeah, why not? It's going to be in the show notes.
It's going to be in the show notes. I know. Well, I haven't changed my website name yet, but I have changed my social media handles because that's easier.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I did that.
Yeah.
I was boxing myself in. Yeah. And so really that's it. Yeah. And like, I think we even talked about this when we talked way back about like LLCs and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's just kind of coming back around of like, I originally LLC'd my name. So like Bonni Mace LLC. And then I got a trade name of Empathetic Enneagram. And I did that, I think, a little bit to like hide and a little bit to be like, oh, so people can hire me so they'll know I'm like Enneagram. And what I've learned and was telling Sarah even while we were getting tea is like the problem with that is either people think they know everything about Enneagram and they don't feel like they need to hire me, or they've never heard of Enneagram, so they don't want to hire me.
Right.
And so trying to like step beyond that. And I've already kind of done it with like, I have values coaching, I have rhythm of life coaching. So, and then those things feel like they didn't make sense under the Enneagram name and were more confusing.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, it's time to just be myself.
Just be Bonni Mace.
Yeah. It feels some kind of way though.
It does?
Yeah.
Because you're putting yourself out there in a different way.
And I think it like kind of brings, before it's like Empathetic Enneagram, it's like, oh, a brand, like that's important, right? And now it's like, oh no, this is like my name.
Right.
This is like my government name. And it's saying that I'm important enough for you to hire. It's like, you're not hiring Empathetic Enneagram, the company. You're hiring me, and it's my name on it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's been all along.
Yeah.
But like in my brain, I was definitely hiding a little bit behind that brand. Sure. So yeah, I'm just going to be like writing a little bit more. And I think like my faith is coming back into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And like really a lot of it, the niches, right? We've been talking about this forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like finally kind of understanding, like, I want to talk more about like what I want to talk about is wholeness. And some of that is going to be rectifying your faith. And some of that is going to be understanding your personality. Yeah. And some of that's going to be values. And some of that's how you live your daily life. Yeah. And like some of that is just musing about the cup of joy and sorrow and how it mixes together to make life. And can you drink it? Yeah. Has been a while since I plugged Henry.
Yeah, Henry now. Yeah.
Yeah. So now all of that gets to come together and make sense without confusing people.
Well,
maybe
look in the show notes for Bonnie's new handles for now.
Yeah.
And eventually website.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a good time to bring it up because
thanks.
It's going to be in the show notes differently.
That's true.
And everybody's going to be like, what's going on?
Yeah, that's true.
Or maybe they wouldn't.
Maybe they wouldn't.
But you know what? You matter, so that they would be like, what's going on,
John.
Bonni? What's going on? Where's Empathetic Enneagram, Bonni?
Yeah.
So no, and it's fun. And it's something maybe we can talk about more too, another time.
Yeah. I mean, we've got some episodes coming out about year end and looking ahead into 2025, which is definitely something I've tried to think about. Yeah. Because 2024 was just a weird thing.
It was a year.
It was a year. It still is a year.
It is a year. It's still here.
There is a little bit left. Just a little.
So you can find Bonnie's new stuff in the show notes.
Yeah. And John's old stuff.
And my old stuff, because here I am. Still not posting social media. So here we go.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. But don't forget, we have a Facebook group now. Yes. And we will link that in the show notes. Did I link that in the show notes? I may have forgotten that last time. So apologies. No, we haven't released that episode yet. Please excuse me for forgetting the calendar.
We have not. You are correct about that.
Movie magic, y'all. Anyway, so we do have a new Facebook group, and in there we're starting to post prompts about like, what are you hoping to achieve this week? And then what are you celebrating at the end of the week? We'll also have some fun places for you to like promote your business, ask questions. It's just a place for Enneagram entrepreneurs, Enneagram 9 entrepreneurs to not feel like we're the only ones in the world that struggle with this.
Everything.
Yes, exactly. But
we're in the river.
We're in the river.
On our boat.
We can talk about the river a lot in that group. Should just change the
we should really need
the photo.
The photo is just a river.
It's just a river.
That'd be fantastic.
With a 9 and a canoe.
That'd be awesome.
Anyway, we're not going to do that. Yeah.
Yes. Also, make sure you subscribe, follow wherever you listen so other people can find us. And yeah, we're wrapping up the year with some more, where we're going to be recording some more soon to wrap up the year and kind of do some year-end reflection and then
2025. Crazy. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. See you guys. Bye.